BCS meeting, which was very, very exciting, including the most important aspects that are used very much in medical, particularly for youngsters. So at this stage, I'd like to pass you across to Ivan, who will actually introduce himself and explain how the animation and games and all the other computing aspects can be a real help and benefit to both the young and the elderly. All the best. Over to you, Ian. Ivan, sorry. One of the other things just to mention before we start, that we are recording it. The BCS will top and tail. Please, could you put your questions into the chat, and then Ivan will deal with this at the end. But we'll actually stop the recording before we come into the question side of things. So at this stage, we officially start and pass across to Ivan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. My name is Ivan Phelan. I'm a Principal Research Fellow at Sheffield Hallam University, and I lead the Impact VR lab. A lot of the work we do focuses around VR and healthcare, and I kind of want to talk about some of the projects that we're working on and upcoming ones as well. Just to start things off, I would like to talk about one of our earlier projects, which is around helping amputees learn how to use a prosthetic arm. So usually you have to go into the clinic to figure out if you have the signals, you're able to generate the signals from your muscles to operate a prosthetic arm. But you have these very advanced arms like the Bionic that can do all sorts of just incredible stuff. You can tie your laces with them, but you can pick up an egg. You can do this really, really good. But the problem is, to use these, you really have to learn how to separate two muscle groups on your arm. So normally when you get fitted, they give you myoelectric sensors, and they go into both muscle groups on your arm, so on the stump of the patient, and you have to, say, control them individually. So if you do a motion like this, you'll feel one muscle group working and the other one not working as much. But in your mind, you have to try and control and separate them so that they can control the prosthetic arm in a way that the different actions, one is for open and one is for closing, but also they don't want to be putting too much force into this every time. So initially, when we were looking at this study, there was a new armband after coming out called the MyoBuy armband. It was very affordable, myoelectric sensor. I think it was about 150 or something at the time. And it was a multi-array of myoelectric sensors on it. And it was doing very similar kind of work to what the more like the medical grade electrodes that you would get in the clinic for the prosthetic arm. And we wanted to see how that would work with in VR to control muscle groups, or to pick up the signals from the muscle groups. But currently, when you actually go into the clinic and they want to see, are you generating those signals, you're usually presented with something like this. This is called a Paula system, and it's just two graph lines. So before, when I talked about two muscle groups, this is what I was talking about. The graph line, say the blue one would be, say, open, and the red one would be closed. But you're meant to control them by looking at this graph line and making them go up and down and avoiding the red barriers. Now, when we did some observations, patients were getting very frustrated with this. They found it very difficult. I tried it, and it was very hard. It's very quick, and they kind of give up. And so like, it feels like the hardware is future tech, but the actual software is from back 50 years ago. So we wanted to see, would using the VR and embodiment of VR to be able to kind of do more kind of experience-based training, rather than what you just saw there, where it's a couple of steps removed from, reaching out and grabbing something. So for anybody that's not used VR, it can be quite good for giving you a sense of embodiment, that like you are in a space, like, and you're like the avatar you're controlling, like you'd almost duck out of the way if something was coming towards you in the virtual world. And we kind of thought the power of that could work really well for amputees, like phantom limb pain and things like that. So we went about kind of thinking, in the early days, we had the older, what was it, the Rift, the original DK1, and we had to use the Connect at the beginning. And we found with the Connect, it was very jittery because I suppose there's part of the skeleton was not there for the Connect to recognize. So we had to compensate and kind of smooth it out, but then that introduced a bit of lag. So slowly but surely, we went away from the Connect and we just started using the actual controllers from the VR headsets that came with them, because they have really good motion sensing on them. So we just attached them to the stump, and then we would offset the virtual arm, say if it was here on the upper part of the stump, we just bring it up further, and then we pivot it at the end stage so that they wouldn't have to overreach as much. We found that worked way better, so we stuck with that. So it's gone through a couple of iterations of headsets. So we went from the original DK1, but then we initially did some testing with some workshops, and we found things were working well. But we really we didn't know, would this actually work with amputees? We didn't at that point. We had not a clue really. But when we did the first patient, we found that without the VR headset on, they had a bowl of apples in front of them and nothing was working. So we kind of thought, oh, I guess the sensor that we have, the armband sensor, is not going to work for amputees. We were hoping it would be very similar, and nothing would work. And so we thought, do you want to try the VR headset at least and see what we've met this world as quite a unique experience, and see what you think of it. And they put on the VR headset, and I think about 3 seconds later, they just reached down and grabbed an apple. And we were kind of shocked. So what was so different? Like why was he able to grab the apple like that? We said, was it because you could see a representation of your arms? And he said, no, I just saw the apple and I wanted to grab it. He said it felt more instinctive. And the OT was shocked. She said at the time he had no training. He never had a prosthetic arm or myoelectric, and it would normally take a lot longer to pick up the initial kind of signals. So she was very surprised. And it's also something I should mention back at the beginning. One of the main reasons for doing this study, we always start with an unmet need, but rejection rates are quite large in using a prosthetic arm. People get one, then they realize they can't use it to its fullest ability, or it's too heavy, and then they don't want to use it anymore. And it's a big cost to the NHS. Should have mentioned that earlier. But yeah, we did some trials with some patients, and it was very positive throughout. And this is even now with the more rougher prototype that we made back then, which I was talking about with the Connect causing issues. And they found it kind of emotional to be able to see their arm and be able to control it. But yeah, they enjoyed it and they wanted to take it home with them and use it more. I'm just going to show you a quick video that gives a bit more context.
It's shaken up the world of games and movies. Virtual reality offers a dive into all-encompassing cyberspace. But back in the real world, gamers are using the same tech for something a bit more serious.
To see the hand there in front of me, but not be wearing a limb, was really surreal. It was really out of this world, if you like.
Kevin lost his arm in an industrial accident 35 years ago. Now he's helping develop a unique project.
So you don't want to put the lid back on the pot?
A kind of try before you buy scheme for artificial limbs.
By contracting the muscles as I normally would do when I'm wearing the normal limb, I was opening and closing the hand and able to move items from one location to another.
Those reflexes enable Kevin to make his electronic limb work. It's a vital decider in whether an amputee's suitable for an expensive prosthetic. But up until now, testing for those reflexes took time and wasn't as fun as VR.
We're talking about a 3-day course to actually go and learn how to use the opening and closing of the hand. And you would be moving shapes, opening doors, making sure that they're making sure that you're capable of using it. and then you're sent away to fend for yourself.
So do you want to go for that Coke can?
That training is even harder if you've never had a limb.
Imagine that for a congenital amputee, they may have never had an arm, so what are those muscles? So like it's very abstract at the moment. It's like imagine grabbing an apple. It's, if you've never done it before, I can imagine it's very difficult to understand what to do.
Ivan's tech could not only speed up the testing, but also train amputees to use the new limb. It's proving a hit with patients.
Some patients said, one in particular said that it's been very emotional being able to see a hand again, but he said in a good way. But he was like, and some of them just didn't want to go out, but they were like, can I have this and just keep playing?
So we did have some really good experience trialing this, but also we did some events out in the public as well. And basically we had like some amputees came in to some events we had in museums, and one was a congenital amputee and never had a prosthetic arm, no training whatsoever. She was quite old at that point, and she was able to use it there and then and practice it. We had one patient as well who had no intention of getting a prosthetic arm, didn't think he would be able to generate the muscle activity required for it. And then after doing the trial, went and requested to get fitted for a prosthetic. And the staff were shocked because they were trying to convince him to go get fitted for one. But it gave him a bit more confidence that he could do it, that he was able to see in the VR reaching out and grabbing things. So since then, we got an NIHR funding to go a bit further with this, to bring it to the next stage. So we started looking at using the medical grade electrodes that I mentioned earlier, much more expensive, but they're the exact same electrodes that you would get with the prosthetic arm. We also looked at different, I suppose, activities to do in there, and these are all based on workshops and discussions with clinicians and patients. So one was box and blocks, where you're moving blocks from one side to the other, kind of dexterity test, and this is all within the same kind of space that you can see here. We upgraded the visuals quite a bit. We've also added things to do with how much pressure you're using. So we have these little paper cups, and the idea is they'll crumple if you put too much pressure, and they'll be mid crumple and full crumple. And the idea is you can keep trying over and over to get better kind of idea of how much pressure you're using. We also added in a real-time debug, kind of where you could see the lights of how much pressure you're using on each muscle group. So there's a little device that comes with the Paula system. It's called a MyoBuy, and there's yellow lights will show how much pressure you're using, how much like you're straining that muscle, and red ones on the other side. So you're meant to keep those quite clean. So you don't want them both to be spiking at the same time. So we enable that in the game as well, so they can see a real-time kind of feedback from the electrodes. As I said, we got access to the data from Autobot, who make the electrodes themselves. So yeah, we did a lot of work. We tried to do other kind of game environments in the world, like driving a forklift. There was even playing ping pong. It was one of the patients thought would be something that would be doable, but we kind of streamlined it and took away a lot of that and focused more on the kitchen. So in the kitchen, you can also make recipes. So like it'll come up with different recipes. It's quite random, but you'll have to go into the fridge to get the ingredients and into the presses and get different things, and then turn on the oven and put things in, and it'll time it then for the next part of the recipe. And it was just a little game to make of it, but all the time they are just practicing with the muscle activity, and that's the main thing. So just to go back, like this is what's currently available. Like it's so many steps removed from like reaching, like the more instinctiveness of grabbing something, and this is something now what we're currently trying to make. It is a very complex system because of the electrodes. It means we have to use a laptop. Usability is a lot harder because you're giving this to the patient to bring home. So currently we're doing trials in Sheffield Teaching Hospital, Leeds, sorry, not Leeds, Nottingham and Manchester hospitals. But in order to get everything in place and to show the patients how to use it, there is a bit of setup, but we're looking at trying to streamline that and potentially not using the medical grade electrodes for home usage and looking at something more like the armband again, just for pure usability, because we just want them to be able to use it and to get up to speed without the complexity of, you know, all the bits and pieces that go into it. We also have a sleeve that's to give an idea of the weight of the arm. So I went back, the rejection rate was a big part of this, and we're trying to reduce that. So really what we want to do is to go home after they find out they can do the muscle activity. We want them to go home with the VR, to have it for 3 weeks, to do some training at home with this system, and then in 3 weeks time to come back and to get fitted. So because currently they go home and they just imagine making that muscle activity. There's nothing really in place from when you're told you have the muscle signals there to getting fitted with the arm. You normally have that big gap there and you're actually not really being trained how to use it to its fullest, particularly the more advanced arms. Now it's different at every site, but from what we've been told, that's kind of the gist. So just moving on to another study, and this is to do with using VR for pain distraction. And it's something that's been used a lot. There's a lot of research out there about VR and how it's good for distracting pain. But when we wanted to look into this a bit further, the new hardware was out. It wasn't long out, and I suppose it was Oculus, let's say DK2 was out at the time when we started doing this project. But also there was a big strides in what can be done with passive VR, so your 360 videos, and back the earlier research didn't really have that kind of 360 video element when they were testing things. They had the 360 video, sorry, they had like more interactive game kind of passive VR work against more interactive VR when it came to pain distraction for burn treatments. So we set about doing a trial with healthy adults using a cold pressure test. So that's like putting your hand in ice cold water that's regulated and it's controlled. And I can't remember the temperature, but I remember it was so cold that my whole arm would seize up when I was testing it at home. But it was similar to this device, but it was very, very cold. And we got the pain threshold and pain tolerance of each patient, sorry, each individual that was trying the games. And we made, well, we used off-the-shelf 360 passive videos. So things like, there was this Henry short film, it's like 3 minute long, and it was very entertaining. And then we had things like, I think it's Notes of Blindness, which is more relaxing, and it was kind of visually quite interesting. And then we had all sorts of different stuff for different videos. But we found with the workshops, we had like people that had burns before, say, one of the things they said was to maybe look at doing things that are a lot more relaxing during the burn treatments. And I wasn't quite sold on that, but we said we would include it anyway to see how it would work. And I'll come back to that in a bit. Other things we did was around more interactive scenarios. So one of them was a more competitive based basketball game. And you'll see here, it's using eye gaze. So where you're moving your head, that's how you're controlling what you're grabbing. And it's all just one button press. Because the reason for all this is when we did the observations, which are so important for our studies, I got to see exactly how the patient would be. And even though we did workshops and we talked to clinicians, and a lot of things don't come up unless you're actually kind of a fly on the wall. And so they are lying down, very limited movement they can make. Like they might be able to move one arm, usually just like you can maybe press something, so like a button. So we designed everything around lying back and just being able to move your head. and everything was like a single button press with a little tiny remote control kind of controller instead of the traditional gamepad type things. So we made that, but we also wanted to make a little bit another kind of piece of content in case you weren't really that competitive. So we made this more puzzle-based game, and now I was the only person working on it at the time, so I'm not an artist, so I had to kind of make do with these little tic tacs which represent sheep, and the green guy is the herder. And the idea is that you're looking down on the environment, and you can look at the place where you want him to move to, and he'll move there and basically scare the sheep to where you want them to go. And here you have like subgroups of them, and you need to get them into the paddock. But here you can see him. So there's a little bit of AI to them. It was using, I think, Unity at the time of this, and it's quite simple. But they get a bit more unpredictable when there's a lot more of them. So here we had like one that they're attracted to, and so the idea was we're better off getting them all connected to him first before kind of herding them. So we want to give choice anyway to the patients, and it was a bit more relaxing. A little bit more. So there's a little sub games in it as well. Didn't realize that was going to come on. So then we trialed it with the healthy volunteers, and we found some interesting things. We found that the passive VR, it worked, but let's say I think they had 5 minutes was the max that we would allow them in the cold presser because the water was so cold. And we found with the passive VR, they were only lasting, say, about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. There was too many ups and downs. So like when things were exciting, it was doing great for the pain, but then when things dipped down, and which happens a lot with more kind of media-based things, like film-based things, the pain will come back, and then they remember and they take their hand out. So what we did then is we tried it with the more interactive, and we were finding that like people were keeping their hand in it for the 5 minutes plus, like the 5 minutes, but then they'd want to stay in it longer, and we'd take them out, and they were, I remember one person even asked, was their hand in the water, like, so it did seem to really, I suppose, distract a lot more than the passive. To the extent, the one that I mentioned that was a lot more relaxing, we found that the feedback from that was it was making the pain worse than without the VR, because I guess they were kind of almost making, their mind was playing tricks with them, I suppose, a little bit more, because it was probably a bit more boring, and it was making the pain that much worse. So that was, found was quite interesting. So we still wanted to compare the 360 to the interactive VR. So what we did was we gave a lot more choice for the 360 videos, and we let the patients pick things that they would be interested in. And we found that helped a little bit more, but it was still, there was a big jump from passive to the more interactive. And here's just a quick video, give an example of
it was
how that went.
an intense burning sensation that it just made you feel like it was just going further and further into your skin and deeper.
Hello Megan, you alright?
Last November, Megan Moxon suffered severe burns to her legs when a washing up bowl filled with boiling water fell into her lap. The 19-year-old's injuries needed regular dressing changes, which she found extremely painful.
So you can pop this on.
Megan was invited to take part in a new trial to see whether playing specifically designed games in the immersive world of virtual reality, or VR, might help with the pain.
Without the VR, I've been nearly in tears because it's that painful. But with the VR, Michelle would be able to prod it, poke it, put a bit of pressure on it, and I wouldn't feel a thing.
One day, a virtual world could help those with pain in the real world. Jamie Coulson, BBC News.
So just explain to us, Dr. Faisal, if you could, what's going on with your brain when you're feeling pain and when you're watching one of these?
So as you know, sort of intuitively, when you have this experience of pain, it's all encompassing from an attention perspective. So that's pretty much all you can concentrate on at that moment in time when you go into sort of acute pain. So what the virtual reality starts to do is it starts to compete for that attention. So in the brain, you essentially start to take away from those resources that are involved in processing the pain, and you start to dedicate them towards processing the information in the environment.
I think it's worth noting as well that you never really like get rid of the pain fully. This is more about being able to tolerate that pain. And we had a good few patients try it, and the feedback was very positive for this. We had one patient who was so badly burnt, like it was horrendous. Now he was in a car crash up in the Peaks, and his whole side was burnt, and he had to get a load of stitches and stapled. And I was rang by the head sister, could I come in with the VR, that they've tried everything with this patient and he wasn't responding to the medication, he wasn't responding to anything. And I remember the morning I went in, I think there was altercations. He just didn't want anybody touching him the night before. And we put him on the VR, and he was laughing during it, which was incredible. Like, to the point where what was it? One of the nurses she was like, they were cleaning the parts, the kind of scabs from, like, it's constant, has to be cleaned. And she said that she was really going for it at one point, because she asked the patient, did you feel that? And he said no. And she was kind of like, for it, like, how did you not feel that? And the head sister said it's not quicker to do it this way. It takes around the same amount of time, but they were getting through a lot more than they would normally. Like, I think they had like something like over 100 staples or something ridiculous on that patient, and they got him like basically all out. It was particularly bad because I remember they were complaining that it was way too many. But that was a very good example. We had another person who didn't want to use it. I think she was in the military and she just didn't want to be part of the study, which is fine, like, obviously. But the staff were after getting to a point where they really believed in the system, and they were trying to encourage her, that, because again, she wasn't responding well to the medication and things, and she did end up using it. And through her interviews and that, she said she wished she had it from day one. She said that it really helped her anxiety, and I think across the board that was a big thing. The anxiety beforehand, like when they knew they were using the VR, their anxiety was a lot less. That's what they were saying, because they thought they would be able to cope with it a little bit more, or they had something to cope with. Like, the games were entertaining, but I imagine that if you knew that you were going through something very painful, you'd really latch on to that experience. You want to kind of, you know, I suppose, immerse yourself into it, because you want to avoid that pain. So I think that probably helps to an extent. But yeah, the patient's very positive. We really wanted to do more with this. We went for further funding, but we didn't get a larger one, but we did get a grant from Epic Games, who make Fortnite and the Unreal Engine. They're quite large company, but they really liked what we were trying to do. So they give us a mega grant to continue working on that. So we're currently upgrading it with the newer technology, because back then when we made that, it's a pretty old system now. So we're just trying to bring it up to kind of current standards. And we really want to do some work around pain distraction and children especially. So we're looking at working with the Children's Hospital in Sheffield to go further with that, because I really do think there's huge potential there. But a lot of the work I see around pain distraction kind of uses the 360 video, and I can see why, because it's cheaper to make, and a lot of people don't have the expertise to make full-fledged video games. But there is a difference in how much pain it takes away or distracts from. Also to note, there was a big difference with if you're a more competitive person, or the basketball game worked better for people that were more competitive, and the people that weren't as competitive, they found the basketball game wasn't as great, but then the puzzle game was better. So it was kind of interesting. Not everybody likes the same movies or songs, you know, or books. So it's kind of content is very important when it comes to things like this. Following up from that, we did another piece of work around upper limb rehab for children. So this one was for kids coming in with arm injuries, or they could have had a bad burn where the skin is constantly tightening and they have to stretch it. And some kids could be only in for like a few days. Some could be going in all their life for upper arm rehabilitation. But there's very low engagement. Like they go into clinic for a short period of time and then they have to go home and do their exercises, but they're not all of them are doing their exercises because it's hard to, you know, constantly keep up with it. But we wanted to develop kind of something that was going to be engaging and particularly for children. So we went to meet physios in Children's Hospital, and just to, again, like I can't stress enough, we do look for what the unmet need is. We don't go with the technology to the people. We try to find out what their main issues are, and then we kind of think about what we have that could potentially match that. But they were saying that they have issues with them doing their exercises, so we got kind of a little booklet from them and examples of the main movements they do. And one of the movements they were doing was behind the back like this. And I kind of thought, that looks like you're reaching for an arrow from a quiver. So we thought an archery game could be quite good, and you get the extra benefits of pulling back on the arrow with the bow. And following that, then they did another movement, and they call it, I think it was tiger claw, and it was like this. And we thought, it looks like you're trying to climb a wall. So we made a climbing game in VR. Now, back at the time, I think there's some climbing games now, but at the time it was quite novel when we did it. So we met these two different scenarios, and we did some first right actually. We did some workshops with and play tests with the school, and we brought the physio with us to observe what we were doing and what the children were, how they were playing it. And it was an ideal situation because we found all sorts of problems, but also things that worked well. So like, for instance, something that worked well was children using a rope like this. The physio was like, oh, that's a really good movement. We don't normally get that particular kind of movement. Could we put more of that in? But then we found that like, we're adults that are making this. And even though we tried to make it so things were fairly in reach, our arm span was so much bigger than the kids that the kids were having to like jump up to grab stuff. So we thought, okay, we better fix that. But also we've seen with some kids that were able to cheat with getting the arrow from the quiver. They'd try and get it quite quick, so they'd flick and they'd be able to get it that way. So what we implemented was a way to get the collider for the quiver that we could move it up or down in real time. So the physio would have control over where it is. So let's say it's a patient it can only go up to here. We could actually bring the quiver up here so they can still engage with it, and then you can slowly start bringing it down to get better at it. But in this instance, it was to stop the cheating. But it obviously worked out well for that as well. And the same child, actually, we noticed that they were using, he was very good at cheating, but he helped us identify some things. Was he would get the bow and he'd outstretch the bow with his good hand, say, out as far as possible. So then he doesn't have to pull back as much with the other hand. And this is something we wanted them to be able to pull back further with the other hand. So what we did then is we made another switch in real time that would make the bow bigger. So you'd have, if they were doing something like that, you could switch it so the bow would get larger. So no matter how far out they went with they outstretched the other hand, they'd still have to go back further with the other one. But the feedback was that the children really liked both games, but they particularly liked the climbing game. They like I think the realness of it is said, like they can still fall, or the illusion of falling and things like that. So they found it more exciting. But there was like there's a sense of vertigo, like you feel like you actually are quite high. But there's a lot of big reaches in it. So after that, we streamlined all the things I mentioned, some of the bugs, and added in some more things. And we did a trial at the Children's Hospital, which is here.
Most of our kids have quite a long-term condition that they need to carry on doing their exercises for sometimes several years.
So remember to keep that one held, so a tight grip on the one on your right.
And they're doing the same things day in, day out. It gets really boring, no one wants to do it. Sometimes it's painful. It's just not really fun. They want to be out playing and doing things with their friends.
It's kind of a bit more playing than exercising, even though you are still doing your exercises. Like, it's fun as well. Oh gosh,
do you need a break or anything like that? Is your arm tired or?
No, it's fine.
She didn't find it easy, whereas before she would have given things up very easily, but she wanted to keep going. She wanted to pop another balloon.
Yes, got it.
And she wanted to reach that next thing, but she's just been an absolute trooper. She just has a smile on her face every day, so it kind of encourages me to be positive.
There we go.
We've had kids come in that can only get their arms up to here, and then they come in straight away and they're picking the arrows up and getting full range of movement and not even noticing. And then when we interview them after, they said that they didn't even notice any pain. So it's been a big shock to me how well actually it has worked to do what we needed it to do.
We were quite surprised how well the project worked. We're quite lucky, fortunate it does work as well as it has. The children were very engaged with it. They were like, as you said, they were coming in going, oh, I can't move this way, this far, and they were measuring the range of movement, and then they were playing the game and they were just full into it, like they were just playing it as normal. Like like that video where the child has the brace on the arm, that was unexpected, because normally we focused on the arm that goes behind her back, but in that instance it was actually worked out as good physio for her as well, because we just wanted, they were saying they just wanted her to be able to hold her arm out straight and to kind of keep it up, especially with the weight, and that was, so it worked out well that the bow, just holding the bow was adequate physio for her. But we had like one patient I remember vividly, was one of the last patients. He came in, it was actually turned out to be it was a burn patient that's been going there for years and quite badly burned. But he came in and he was basically like, I don't want to do rehab. You told me that I wasn't going to have to do rehab, and the physio was like, trust me, this is different. You really should try this. So he was a very good case of a child that just didn't engage at all, like, and I didn't realize how much until he came. But then when he put on the VR, he was smiling from ear to ear, like, and he was full belt, like racing up to the top of the tower, playing the VR, like playing the archery. And then when we got out, the physio was asking, like, you know, what's the difference? Like, why are you doing it now? But when I ask you won't do any of them. And I said, well, you just want me to just wave my arm around, whereas this is something I want to do, and I would do this if it was something that was available. So yeah, like I guess it's the kids just kind of forget and just want to play the game, and we make something that's as engaging as possible, that it kind of captures their imagination, I suppose, to keep on playing, and they forget about how far they're going with it. Because we had some kids, it was quite funny that after playing it, like, as I said beforehand, to go in and they're complaining but like not being able to go that far, but then to take it off and their parents are there and their physio is there, kind of smiling and laughing, kind of going, you told me you weren't able to do it, but I just saw you now and you were like, you know, going full belt. So they had no kind of excuse to go fall back on later on, I guess. So it doesn't need like an extended amount of playtime, because the belief is there, like they can do it. And I think it is just a lot about pushing past that limit. And I did ask the physios, was this a concern of mine really at the time, was like, can we go too far? Can they like reach further than they can? And she said, basically not for what we were doing. Like it would be very hard for them to like damage to go further than that's physically possible. Like, so that was good to know. But yeah, the kids found it easier, felt like they didn't have an injury. Like the interviews we had been very positive. We found out afterwards that the range of movement stuck. It wasn't the case that we reverted back. So that was very positive as well. So we wanted to reduce pain, faster healing, reduced amount of visits, waiting time, the real-time control that I mentioned, but adherence. Now, there was one thing that we felt that we didn't really tackle, and it was the adherence, because really where that's happening is at home. And as you might have seen in a lot of these, we had a big laptop and sensors and things like that. And it's just not suitable inside in a clinic as well. A lot of clinics are quite small. They don't have the space. They don't have the time to be setting up all these pieces of technology. So we really wanted to go, how do we test this in a home setting? And obviously the cost of a laptop and headsets and all that, it's going to add up. But luckily, there was a new standalone headset being released, and it was the Oculus Quest. And so we decided this is a perfect time. We can port what we made, which was a fairly graphical, like intensive game, the one that we made initially with the climbing and that, and port it onto the standalone headset. Now that was naive, because this is basically just a mobile phone, especially the first Quest 1. And the amount of optimization we had to do was basically remaking the game again. We had to go a more stylized look, and we did make the game again, but we added a lot more kind of story to the game and a lot more kind of mechanics. And like, so initially it was just archery and climbing, and we kind of merged the bow and arrow that could now create, say you had a rope arrow that you could make a path and then climb across that. So it meant we could make much broader kind of open areas and puzzles like in the game world. We also made like teleport arrows, and I think we're going to make one for kind of, I suppose it's like a bomb arrow, but we didn't get there for that one. But it just, yeah, allowed us to go a little bit further, but we had severe problems with optimization for the Quest 1. We got there, but then we got to upgrade to the Quest 2, which is way more powerful in comparison. Still a lot of optimization. You can't get away with a lot with the Quest headsets, but it made us better developers, I think. But here's just some screenshots of the new style. So you can see it's a lot more low poly, but the gameplay is still there. It's that same kind of feeling and atmosphere. So we have these like gnomes, and it's supposed to be this big story that kind of continues on, kind of a general arc that they're trying to make their way towards this castle that they see at the beginning. And we have like a narrative kind of to encourage them to keep going. But we pepper like the arm movements in. So before it was just like, you know, the bow and arrow and the climbing, but we had new ones, but we didn't make it the main focus of the game. I think this is important. We made it that it was, there's lots of movements in there, but there's also other non-physical movements. So like, we don't want to kind of be too heavy-handed with it either. So we wanted them to kind of have enough kind of variety in the game, but in order to progress, they still had to do the exercises, you know, as part of the gameplay. So it's just kind of managing that and just making sure that you're making the right calls regarding what's worth keeping in the game and what's not. So what we did is we had that new version. We got, how many patients was it? It was during COVID, and COVID happened, everything got stopped. Nearly every project you'll see coming up, they were all cancelled, not cancelled, paused. This is only one that we could continue because we were going to give the headsets for them to bring home with them. And we had the interviews afterwards that like the kids were coming back from school and going, come on, I'm ready to do the VR, like where is it? Like, whereas before they'd have to try and like force them to do their exercises. The range of movement that we got, we found, so they had it for like, it was 3 weeks at home. And when they came back, the range of movement from the bad arm was matching the good arm. So that was pretty exciting to hear that. So having it with all the new stuff we put in it, and having it at home, it really helped. And we put a lot of work into user friendliness of the game as well. Like saying, it didn't feel like you were playing or doing physio, it just felt like you're playing a game, which is exactly what we were aiming for. And this is just a quick video of what the current version looks like. Actually, this is Quest 1 version. Quest 2 version looks better. We kind of make this exciting kind of like exploration. It's the rope arrow I mentioned earlier. Maybe little puzzles. So like it has kind of a nice atmosphere to it, but it is still challenging. Like, so we had like the kids that were like, because they were going to have it for a couple of weeks, so you have to make sure there's a bit of a challenge there. But yeah, the feedback for that has been quite positive, and we're very happy with it. Stanford University Hospital, they want to use it, and we're just currently setting up things to make it available for them. We still want to get more data. Still wanting to get like health economic data to really show, you know, it does exactly what we're saying. But it's very promising. Like it does seem like kind of it's obvious, really. I suppose kids are getting their exercise by playing the game. Like after that, we started looking into another unmet need, and this was straight after the other project. One of the physios is saying, I think it was like the day we finished up, said like, well, if you think that's bad, come out here. All those people waiting out there, they're all getting lower limb rehab, and said that we can't keep up with them because kids were getting very anxious. Like they wouldn't put the weight on the leg after surgery and things like that. So then if they don't put the weight on the leg, it can't start healing, and they can't be discharged either because they have to be able to use crutches before they can leave. So they were still using the frame. So some patients could be out in a day. So when I did observations, they were like really fit kids that were like straight off the bed, walking, not an issue. They're out that evening. But then you have other kids who are like, oh no, this is tender. I can't possibly stand on that, and there's no way I'm going to stand on it. So we wondered like, how could we use VR to kind of encourage them, you know, to put that weight on? And it was a tricky one because normally you have the controllers and they're in the hand. So first of all, we thought we don't want to have all this extra hardware again, because it's so much nicer going in with just one headset and going, here you go. So we used the controllers and we connected them to the leg. So we have straps on the legs, and instead of them controlling the hands, they were going to control the legs instead. So that was one thing, and obviously there was a lot of work in refining that and making sure it felt comfortable and it looked right. But the other thing is, so what game would you make? Like it's literally walking, and it's like walking for 5 minutes. How do you make that like exciting and something that's going to take away from like you just had surgery the day before? And as well, like you're wearing a headset in VR, so we have to be kind of conscious that we want to walk straight and keep an eye on their footing. There was two physios at all times with the kids when they were doing this, but we thought maybe whack-a-mole, that like you're using your leg to hit things on the ground. But then one of the guys mentioned about what if you're like a mech, like a giant, like you're a robot, and like you had robot legs. And then that kind of ballooned into, what if it was like one of those Marvel movies where it's like, you know, there's like an alien invasion and you're in like this giant mech transformer suit, because we wanted to empower the kids. We wanted them to feel like they were like super powered, like, and that, you know, they had these like really strong legs, and that, you know, to make it really, really bombastic and really like entertaining and cinematic, I guess, to the point where they don't think about the big cast on their leg, or the brace on their leg, and they just walk. So we looked at making said legs, low poly again. This is very hard game to optimize as well on the Quest 1 initially. And we had this kind of alien invasion. So we went very cartoony. So all the aliens are all very like colorful and stuff like that. We got really good sound design for it. Went through a lot of iterations. And as I said, this was like 5 minutes of walking, but we knew that if we could get them to walk once, that was like the upper limb. Once you know they could do it, then they don't really need the VR again. You know, that belief that they can do it is there. So we had all these little alien, like different designs, and we had a boss at the end of it. So we got an idea for the stride. We talked to the clinicians to figure out, you know, what way to encourage them to take the right steps, and how do we measure that. And we also had things in the game that's kind of, when you stop and wait, there's parts of the game where you stop and wait, you do a little bit of stuff, but then there's these things that come up to get them to move on, and there's things that they pick up on the ground that the more they play it, the more cooler the thing is, especially for kids that at the age that we were looking at, they kind of more exciting kind of I suppose weapons, but they're all like you'll get an idea of that now in a second, I think. But yeah, this is currently being trialed. We have 11 patients so far. We've got more to go, and the feedback's been really positive again. Like, I was a bit worried about this one because it was a little bit more complicated, because you're walking down a much longer period amount of space, and I was worried about tracking. I was also worried about like the tracking of the legs, but also you know, that to make sure they actually walk in a straight line. And yeah, I wasn't sure how well this one would work. But the feedback's been very good. Consultant said there recently, he said he had a very anxious girl, and that, what did he say? He said, yeah, it made a massive difference. A massive difference for her anxiety. And that's been the case. We had one parent saying that they've had to do this several times, that the patient, he's had to come in for surgery. And she said that she's always trying to make him more upbeat about it. And he played the game, and she said that she noticed a big difference on how far and how fast he was doing it and getting through it. And afterwards, he was just delighted, and he had this positive experience from doing his rehab. And she said that made a world of a difference. Like, he was going back telling his friends about, you know, it was something special that he did differently to like what they were doing. And he had, normally it's like such a negative experience going to the hospital and doing this, and he said this was such a change. But like across the board, kids they're finding it very, very fun, and not realizing they walked that far. Like this, the anxiety was obviously the main area we're looking at. But when I was doing it in VR, I could put my whole foot down and not be scared. Like, this was coming up a lot. And like, yeah, they were walking further than expected. Now, we had more data to get, but it has been quite positive, and teachers, we're learning a lot as it is. But here's this a quick cinematic video. It looks a bit intense, but we're designing the trailer that way on purpose. See you from the outside. That's what it's like. Then that's when I'm walking in what they see. boss battle at the end with that boss, and they all really enjoyed that. So there was kind of a build up, and then there was this kind of epic showdown. So they were making their way all the time, getting closer and closer and getting more advanced stuff to kind of get them there. I realize I'm getting close to the end of time, so I'm just going to go a little bit quicker the next couple. So we're doing another study around dysphagia. This is very early on, but it's to help people with swallowing, particularly after a stroke. So I spoke to speech and language therapists about a different potential project, and they mentioned about dysphagia and about swallowing and how difficult it is, and was there anything we were looking at in that area. And they talked about a videoscopy technique where they record a video and the patient would watch that while swallowing later on, and they found it quite useful. So I went away and kind of started thinking about it more and more, and I thought, well, if that's a pre-recorded, what would happen if you made that something that was real time, that you could actually see the swallowing happening as you do it? And we made 2 scenarios. One was this bedroom, and the idea was, so this is currently a prototype, but this was like, we're tracking the larynx, so we get an idea where the larynx is, and they can practice over and over doing their swallow in front of a mirror, a virtual mirror, so to speak, or in this case, a webcam. And it was just a place to kind of calibrate it and get used to using the game. But then moving on, then we've just done a play test for this as well. And so it's a basketball, going back again to basketball. The reason being is we wanted to use this device that we have that it'll capture when they do a swallow, and that's what will release the shot for the basketball. So the idea is we want to encourage them to swallow, and then they'll get a basket. And I forgot to mention, currently, I sat in and did some observations on where they're getting electric shock kind of treatment. So it was like, it's pretty hardcore, kind of getting a shock from this collar to force you to swallow. So we wanted to kind of do similar, but without the shock part, and kind of, if we make it engaging enough, so we have like multiplayer as well. And it's for a lot older generation, this, but we have it like, it's Americana, but it's also very 60s music. We have like all the royalty-free music from, Lollipop, and there's a really fun kind of upbeat kind of tone to it all. We've yet to trial this. We're very close to starting, and I'm very eager to see how this works. I'm hoping it does work, because I think it could make quite a difference to people if we could help even a bit, rather than having to go through like more intense kind of forced swallows. I swear I'm getting close to the end. This is another study where we started, and it's to do with Duchenne's. It's a muscle weakness disease. It's horrendous. It's children, especially boys, get it, where as you get older, the muscles like degenerate more and more, to the point where they're in a wheelchair and they have low life expectancy. So they currently have to do like calf exercises, like stretches every day, almost like brushing your teeth. It's very important that they do it constantly and every day. The reason being, it saves off the effects of it. So we're working with Leeds and Sheffield hospitals around what can be done here. So there's very low adherence, because the kids are very young, like, so it's, I have a young child, and I could imagine it was very difficult getting to do these calf stretches every day. So we wanted to look into using VR and how could we do that. Now, their stability isn't that great, so I wasn't crazy about the idea of doing like with other studies where we'd make the exercise part of the gameplay. So this is quite different in that we're making a game world. So this is going to be kind of a larger game, and there's going to be a lot more progression to it, that they have to come back to it every day, but they lose their progress if they get defeated in it, and they have to start from scratch. But they gain knowledge, but also there's a way to get perks that they'll earn through doing their exercises. So we'll have these mini games where they're lying down, and ideally the way we want to do it is they do their exercise with their parent, and that exercise unlocks kind of rewards and extra time to play the main game. So we're kind of using, there's a kind of term you might know of, it's called microtransactions, where you use money to get, you know, unlockables in a game. But instead of money, we're using exercise as the currency. So we really want them to, we really want to make a really good game that they like, and then use the exercises then to give them some more cool stuff to unlock in it. It's a very ambitious game that we're making, to be honest. Probably it's our biggest thing to date, because we want them to play it every day, and we're trialing it for, I think it's 8 weeks. So it's a long time and a lot of content we need to make. So we're really trying hard with that one. That we'll know the results of that probably in a couple of months. And recently, just very recently, I think we're starting this in June, so I won't really talk much about this, but we're going to start a project around social anxiety. So it's a very different area for us. It's something we've been very interested in working in for a long time. And we're working with psychiatrists from Sheffield Children's Hospital to make something more focused around children and social anxiety. But yeah, I believe that's that. And here's my details. It's i.phelan@shu.ac.uk. And if you're on Twitter, I'm at Philo. Our Impact VR Lab is the Twitter handle for the Impact VR team. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. I'm just going to stop to share now.